A common question that beginner players usually have is, what is the best build? Now, there's a lot of issues with that question. Imagine if you walked into a clothing store in real life and asked, what are the best clothes to wear? Now, the person working there will look at you like there's something wrong with you. Just like in real life, you don't wear the same clothes for every activity. If you're going to the gym or if you're going to a wedding, for example, I would hope at least that you don't wear the same thing to both. This analogy applies to Albion a lot because what many beginners don't realize is that gear in this game works similarly to clothes in real life. Another analogy is, say you want to buy a gun, you live in the US, you just walk into a gun store and say, hey, I want to buy the best gun. And then the shop owner looks at you and says, well, we have snipers, we have shotguns, we have pistols, what exactly are you looking for? And then you reply with, nah, I just want the best gun you have. Well, again, are you looking to hunt birds, shoot down a massive horde of zombies, something for a stealth mission? Again, you need to adjust based on the activity. So with that out of the way, how do you know which gear and which weapons fit different activities in Albion Online? Well, the easiest example is probably by comparing Mercenary Jacket to Hellion Jacket. Where would these be useful in theory? So just by reading their abilities, it is obvious that Hellion Jacket is more of a group PvP jacket since you want to hit multiple targets, and it is obviously useful on a melee user since you want to be in range to heal up when using it. Now on the other hand, Mercenary Jacket is basically only useful for 1v1 PvP situations. It's also useful for solo PvE if you have trouble clearing those, especially bosses. Now, that was a pretty easy example, but how do you actually learn what is viable for certain activities? With regards to weapons, I did make a tier list of all different weapons in the game for the major activities, but when it comes to builds, it's a little bit more complicated because everything is situational. I get it. As a new player, it's difficult to know, and if you want to find meta builds, it seems almost impossible. There's little resources available, or if you find any, they are more than likely outdated. For example, Albion Online website, the builds on the character builder page are all almost all of them are outdated. Now, this is my number one tip to you if you're looking for a main build in quotation marks. Give up. Learn the game slowly, and over time you will learn which items work for different content. But I won't leave you just with that because this would be a pointless video otherwise. My approach in general is, instead of giving you a single fish, I would rather give you a fishing rod and teach you how to fish yourself, you know? But as a beginner, you probably don't even know how to use a fishing rod, what it is. You don't even know what a fish is, you know? So what I have done is I have compiled a list of resources if you want to find meta builds for certain activities. Now, let me say there's a lot of caveats here. These builds might be off like 3 months from now. You know, they might not be accurate. There might be a lot of swaps you're missing out, but they are decent cookie cutter builds, at least at the time of me posting this video. Hopefully, though, the resources that I will provide, like the methods and the way how you find the meta builds, those should still be valid for years to come, unless SBI changes a lot of things. Alright, so let's get started with solo dungeons. For solo dungeons, you can honestly run any weapon you like except any of the healing or the tank weapons. Those will be a lot slower, but light crossbow and spears are top tier in that category. But you can slap on a Scholar Cowl if you need energy, Stalker Jacket, Royal Sandal Stepper Cape with any weapon you like, honestly, and it will still be pretty good clearing speed. For group dungeons, it's a little bit more complex because now we run into the issue of having to build around a party composition. This is another thing to keep in mind. For example, having one person in the party on Druid Cowl is a good idea. Now, who's supposed to use it? Well, it depends on the exact builds you have in the party. So now we have another layer of complexity. For the tanks, you can go with a mace. Air compressor is really strong. Incubus mace, pretty solid, highly recommended with a sarcophagus. Hammers can also work, but a little trickier to clump up the mobs, still usable though. For DPS, you have a lot of options. Obviously, Frost and Crossbows are the meta picks. Having one supportive DPS is good, like a Shadowcaller. Having one melee with a Spectre Jacket is meta as well. Honestly, for this, just go anything that has useful, sustained DPS. So Frost, Crossbows are obviously the best. Fire is also decent. For healers, for group dungeons, you always want to go with a holy healer. Nature is a lot harder to pull off. I don't recommend it. For Avalonian Dungeons, it honestly depends on who the raid leader is. Every Discord and guild has their own preferences, but you can check out my guide and the builds I recommend for an optimal clear. But yeah, if you're doing an Ava, then the Discord you're in probably has build recommendations and what swaps you need, and if they don't, then you should probably leave that Discord ASAP and not do Avas with them. For hardcore expeditions, honestly, just join the HC Discord, link in the description below. The builds are right there. I don't do enough HCs to give you any useful advice with regards to that. For corrupted dungeons, I would highly advise you to check out murderledger.com and see what the top players are playing. Some of these guys stream as well, so you can check out their streams, ask them for tips, what abilities are good for different matchups, etc. And obviously you can see some gameplay of how the build works out in action, so that's pretty good. For Hellgates, there are two ways I recommend if you're interested in finding the meta builds, and that is either checking the top infamy leaderboards in-game, seeing what they are using there. But I also highly recommend the Hellgate Hub Discord, link in the description below, has meta builds for 2v2, 5v5, and 10v10 Hellgates. There's also veterans there who help answer questions within each Hellgate type. So if you're struggling, say in a certain matchup, for example, you're doing 2v2s and you need help, how do I beat Frost? And then someone will come there and they will reply, yeah, play Frost yourself. No, but seriously, a pretty good place to find Hellgate related builds and tips and tricks. For crystals, it's a little bit more tricky, but I will suggest watching the Albion online Twitch streams when they cover 5v5 and 20v20 content, and just seeing what the top teams are playing. But you can also take inspiration from the 5v5 Hellgate builds. For 20v20, it's again similar to Avalonian Dungeons in the sense that whoever is in charge has builds set that they want people to run to fit the comp they came up with. So if you do get into a team, just ask what they want you to use specifically. But it's a mix of 5v5 and 10v10 gear basically. For ganking, there is no real meta per se, but I think almost everyone will agree when I say that double-bladed staff is one of the best choices out there with the mobility, the CC, and the slows. Again, for ganking, you just want stuff that helps you lock down a target, slow them, purge them, kill them. So there's a lot of viable weapons, there's a lot of stuff that works, and here you need to build your comp properly if you're ganking in a group. So you need to make sure you have at least one purge, at least a stalker hood or a guardian armor to reveal invisibilities, some damage, and some CC. So there's a lot of stuff you can run. So we have open world stuff left. As a solo player, you want mobility. You want stuff that lets you get out in case more people come, and believe me, if you're going to take a 1v1 in the open world, suddenly 5 people will come out of nowhere. So there are a lot of good stuff you can use. You obviously want a weapon that's mobile, so one-handed spear is really good, bloodletter is decent, carving is nice for the outplay 1v5 potential, warbow is solid. Again, there's a lot of viable stuff. It really depends what your goal is exactly. I will highly recommend Undead Cape also, very good for solo players. For group open world content, you're mainly going to be playing stuff that has AoE damage, short cooldowns, sustained damage, clap weapons, dive weapons. There's a lot of viable options, but the main thing is you want some sort of sustained damage with short cooldowns. So you're not quite going full ZVZ mode. You still want stuff on a relatively short cooldown. So stuff like Spirit Hunter, Mist Piercer, Brimstone, Energy Shaper, they don't quite make the cut. They're obviously good for ZVZ, but it doesn't quite fit what we're doing here. There are no massive clumps in that sense like in ZVZs basically. So you need to opt for different weapons. Something like Longbow or One-Handed Frost is a perfect example of what would be good. Carving, Great Axe, Bridled, Clarent. There's a lot of strong, low cooldown weapons that you can use that fit this content. Now, an important thing to notice is that for tanking ZVZs, you usually go with stuff like Grove Keeper, Grail Seeker, Soul Scythe, etc. But in this small/medium scale content, you want to opt for lower cooldown stuff. So for example, Great Hammer, Heavy Mace, and Hand of Justice are really solid options. And last but not least, we have ZVZs. Chances are whatever guild or faction Discord you're in has specific builds they want you to run. So yeah, just check those out. But the rule of thumb is you want really impactful abilities. Being on a long cooldown is not an issue here. So I did mention these earlier, but Spirit Hunter, Brimstone, Energy Shaper, Damnation are good for this content because you can run in, drop your big damage or whatever you're using, and then you go back and you sit. You can basically wait for 20 seconds anyway. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope that the resources I provided in this video will be useful and that instead of spoon feeding you a random build that most other YouTubers do, I hope this will be useful in the long run. I will briefly cover the Frost build, the one-handed Frost build. That is the only exception that I can think of to this build where you can run this build for almost any content and still be very successful. That is the Frost build. The one-handed Frost build you can use for almost anything besides ZVZs, and for ZVZs you can just swap the one-handed Frost to a permafrost. That is like the only exception to the general rule where you want to swap accordingly based on which activity you're doing. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, do leave a like and a comment. Check out my other Albion online content and subscribe for more if you're interested. Hope you have a good one and see you next time.